Welcome to MACC Talk, a Middle Tennessee podcast from Monthaven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm Kaylin Warden, Arts Education and Outreach Coordinator at the MACC. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at U.S. Pest Protection, U.S. Pest, helping you enjoy peace of mind for your home and family.
Thank you, Kaylin, and welcome everyone to MACC Talk. I'm your host, John Pitcher. We like to think of the MACC as a cultural town square where we encourage everyone to be their creative best. So, Kaylin, what sort of creative things have you been up to this week?
I've been preparing for our upcoming Arttoberfest and gathering all of the supplies ready for our art projects that we'll be having. And personally, I have been working on an oil painting, which I only started oil painting a few months ago, so it's slow progress.
Okay, what are you painting?
I found an image by Jesse Mockren, an oil painter, and they say to try to recreate your favorite paintings in order to learn. So I picked one of hers that I really liked, and I'm trying to emulate it.
That's really true. That is a lesson for all creative people, I think. Find who you like and just start imitating them until your own voice starts to come through. So very good. Well, Kaylin, let's go ahead and introduce today's guest. He's Sergeant First Class Joseph James, U.S. Army retired. Joe is a member of the MACC's Veterans Advisory Committee. His experience has really helped us guide our Between the Lines Healing Arts program for military veterans. Joe joined the military in July 2000 when he was just 17. A combat veteran, he deployed once in support of Operation Enduring Freedom and 3 times in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He is a recipient of the Bronze Star and Purple Heart, among many other awards and commendations. Joe and his wife Jarin will be chairing the MACC's Boots and BBQ fundraiser on October 19. That fundraiser supports the MACC's Between the Lines Healing Arts program for military veterans and their families. Joe James, welcome to MACC Talk.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, you know what? I was just wondering, we've heard your expansive bio. America today has an all-volunteer army. It's had one since 1973. What inspired you in that kind of world to enlist in the year 2000?
Well, actually, there's many reasons. One, I'm the son of a Navy corpsman, so I was a Navy brat for a little bit. But also, my grandfather was a Seabee in World War II, and so service was always a big, important part of our lives. And you know, when I hear about combat and different things my grandfather went through on the shores of Guadalcanal, you know, as the Japanese would be bombing the airstrips, and he has to fix them up for the planes to land. So, stories like that really inspired me to want to serve. And I remember a quote from President Kennedy a long time ago: "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." That was also an inspiration for me. I wanted to find a way to give back and serve my nation that's given me so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, how old were you at that time?
Oh, when I first joined, 17 years old.
So you were like right getting out of high school.
Yeah, I graduated at 17, and that summer I went to basic, Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Okay. The Army obviously clicked for you, I'm thinking, because you went all the way to become a Sergeant First Class. That's not every enlisted man. What is it about Army culture that worked for you so well?
I love the brotherhood and sisterhood behind it, you know, where we can be able to suffer together, but also, you know, celebrate and have fun together. There's something when it comes to, you know, bleeding next to somebody else, or going through a process that just miserable to be involved in, like basic training or something. And you get a bond out of that, sometimes deeper than blood. And so I have people that I still talk to closer than, you know, some of my family members than we are. And it's that whole process of that teamwork and brotherhood that we can rely on. And for many ways, this brotherhood and sisterhood, our lives depend on it. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that we take care of each other, because at some point they're going to probably pull you out of the fire.
Mm-hmm. And that's a huge motivating factor in the service, right? You're looking out for your buddies. That's your real big motivation. You know?
Yeah.
It's not a desire to be John Wayne or a hero. It's you know, you're part of this team.
Yeah. The stronger your team is, the more chances you are to survive whatever you go through. Uh-huh. And I did 4 combat deployments, and it wasn't me being some hero that, you know, like you'd see on Rambo or something. No, most of the things that you hear about successful missions all came around because of teamwork and how we're able to work together successfully. And the more you can communicate, which is, believe it or not, the military is all about communication, not just shooting. So it's how well you can communicate, how well you can explain what's going on, or if you need help, talk to people clearly and concisely. That's how missions are won. Teamwork.
Yeah. We're speaking with Army veteran Joe James about his service and his work with Monthaven. We'll be back after this important message.
Creativity involves breaking out of established patterns in order to look at things in a different way. The staff at U.S. Pest Protection, local professionals protecting families and their homes from harmful pests, share this outlook with the staff at Monthaven Arts and Cultural Center. Creativity consists of rearranging what we know in order to find out what we do not know. To think creatively, we must be able to look freshly at what we normally take for granted. U.S. Pest Protection is rated the #1 family-owned pest control and termite exterminator in Middle Tennessee, serving Sumner County for 40 years. For information, visit them at uspest.com.
We're back with Army veteran Joe James. You mentioned Guadalcanal, and I thought that was fascinating because my wife's uncle, R.C., she knew him for her entire life as a school principal in Mississippi. That's what she knew. And he was, during the age of integration of the schools, he was, a leader in that in Mississippi. And what she found out about him only after he passed away at a very old age, was that in August 1942, he was in that Marine Division, the first one to hit Guadalcanal.
Wow.
I mean, that was like that Tom Hanks movie, the Pacific that series. He was in that first wave that landed on Guadalcanal, and he went through all that. They had to get Henderson Field because, that's what the Japanese were building. When the Americans got it, they called it Henderson Field. But had the Japanese succeeded in building an airstrip there, they would have dominated that part of the Solomons and possibly cut off supplies to Australia. So that was the first great invasion of World War II, and he was like 17, right out of high school, and he was one of the first guys to hit that beach. He never spoke about it. His entire life, and maybe that's part of that generation. It's kind of the suck it up generation as well as the greatest generation. But have you found from your experience, because you are a combat veteran, and you're very much part of that culture, how typical is that?
Well, I would say a lot of it has to play in certain generations. I agree with you. Like my grandfather, there's only a few stories I learned, and some of them were very hard for him to tell. I, never really got to see his medals and things that he earned. Really, I didn't really know all that he did until, I got his, enlisted records, and I could see what, where he was and what he did. But yeah, I would say a lot of it's that generation. But I think nowadays, and maybe it's a male thing too. Maybe we don't like to really talk about some of the things that we really suffer through, and we really, because veteran-wise, I think the best way to say it is that we don't like to talk about what we've gone through with people that may not understand or appreciate the severity or the seriousness of it. And so, we will give it like a glossy overview if somebody really wants to know what's going on. We usually keep the most details, not even to our spouses sometimes, but mostly to our service brothers, sisters, those that we know would understand. And it's no different than probably any other, service-based organization like police officers or firefighters. I don't understand the role of a firefighter, but I can understand when losing somebody and the sacrifice. I can understand that. And I think a lot of my generation, the millennial generation, I think we're probably more apt to speak up. Probably. I've been seeing that more with different nonprofits I've been involved with. But still, those that have really had trauma or PTSD related stuff, I believe that they still hold that in. And that really weighs into that 22 a day. And you see more people taking their lives in the military than ever before. Because I think there are some stigmas of what we've gone through, and it is hard to talk about. But yeah, my grandfather's generation, he had a book called Can Do. It's about the Seabees, World War II. I actually have it. And I learned a lot about what he did through a book. And then even John Wayne had a movie about the construction battalions in World War II. And
Fighting Seabees.
And I watched it with my grandfather one time when I was a teenager. And he was like, that's exactly what it was like. Or he'd be like, well, it wasn't like that. But you know how movies are. And so he would speak up a little bit. But mostly I think, in my opinion, that generation, you know, they kept it to their vest, kept it close to themselves, because what would a punk teenager like me at the time understand about World War? What would I understand about sacrifice?
Well, a good friend of mine wrote a book he was a writer. He wrote a book at the behest of a family whose father was served in World War II. He was a sailor. He was in the Navy. They lived up in Rochester, New York, so he spent the rest of his life, in addition to being a carpenter, he was always out on Lake Ontario with a sailboat. The one thing he would not talk about was that the destroyer he was on in World War II was sunk. Oh. It was one of those that was sunk, and it was one of those where, you know, a lot of his buddies got eaten up by sharks. Oh. It was the South Pacific. And he actually, the family though, was so grateful for his service and for what he did. He couldn't talk about it, that they actually commissioned this book, and it was a beautiful book. You know, went into and it sort of climaxed with that, and then kind of went out of it as just sort of his life, and so that is a big part of what we think about here at Monthaven. Why we talk about this all the time is that I think certainly the older people I knew, my parents' generation or grandparents' generation, they were the greatest generation.
Yeah.
And one thing that's different about that generation from today is that really was a total war.
Sure.
So, I mean, what you guys have gone through is a little different and what you guys went through was different from the Vietnam War, which was really hard on those guys.
Draft heavy, yeah.
Yeah, that was really hard on those guys, because those guys came back and they weren't getting parades.
Yeah.
You know, the World War II guys, they had lots of parades, but it was total war, and they kind of all served.
Yeah. Well, the Vietnam generation to me is one of my favorite to talk to and work with. They have experienced so much worse than I ever have. And I did four deployments. And every time I would deploy back, there was always organizations of people supporting us and being there. And then a big portion of those people were the Vietnam vets. They're the ones leading those organizations. Like Yellow Ribbon, or all the different groups, and they were saying, "Welcome home, welcome back."
Right.
Yeah, and they would give us hugs, and to me that was just a very moving point, because I go out of my way to say "Welcome home" to a Vietnam vet, because they may have never heard it before in their life, and if they heard it 1,000 times, I hope I give them 1,001, because they deserve it.
Welcome.
And that's why veterans, today's veterans, we honor all those who came before us. They set the groundwork for us to have the experience of what we had, because I think ultimately as a society, I think we've all realized we treated that generation so poorly. And then it's almost like a switch went off, and they're like, never again. We'll never ever do that to our military.
I've noticed that veterans though treat each other a little differently than the public.
Yeah.
I've been among veterans who are meeting each other, and of course they both serve, so they're not saying thank you for your service. But one of the things a lot of them will ask each other is, "Are you okay?" I've actually heard that.
Yeah.
How are you doing? Because for a lot of them, it's challenging.
Sure. Yeah. I would say the first thing we do is we talk bad about their branch to each other.
Okay.
You got to do the rivalry thing first. You know, like I was Army, so any Marine Corps, we probably just talk smack for a moment.
Right.
But it's like a mutual respect thing.
Right.
Like brothers do. But yeah, no, it is. It's usually hey, crap face or whatever. And then after we're so mean to each other. My wife has made note of that, because the things I say about some of my military friends to their face publicly, she'll be like, "I can't do that." And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, I kind of earn the hate / love equally, with them. So yeah. I think it's like I was saying, our generation is when it comes to trauma, maybe there's a little more stigma to speak up. But I think when like you were saying, when we come up to each other and ask how we're doing, we really mean that, because a lot of us will pull away from society, and we won't get the help that we need, and we're too worried about how other people would think about us, or especially men being weaker, acting weak, and it's the stigma of it, of getting help mentally. And I know that it's going away from that. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still there. You have alpha type males that are used to being in charge, used to not having problems, or always having resources to turn around to. And when they get out, there are resources, but they're harder to get to.
Yeah. We're speaking with Army veteran Joe James about his service and his work with Monthaven. We'll be back after this important message.
U.S. Pest Protection reminds us that art lessons can introduce students to problem-solving techniques that can help them see the world in new ways. The MACC offers multiple art classes for students pre-K to 12th grade, along with adult classes. Register today at monthavenarts.org. This message is a courtesy of U.S. Pest Protection, serving Middle Tennessee for 40 years. Find them at uspest.com.
We're back with Army veteran Joe James. Your service was in your combat service was in Iraq for the most part, wasn't it?
Yeah, 3 of my 4 deployments were in Iraq. Yeah.
Okay. And that must have been extremely traumatic in a lot of ways, because this is sort of like, when I think about what these are not like charging a hill or something. This is a lot of this is like urban fighting. This is sort of like Stalingrad. That's some of the roughest kind of fighting.
Yeah.
How did you guys sort of manage that kind of stress on a day-to-day basis?
Oh man. Okay. Well, when we first invaded Iraq, I was with the 101st. So I did my. Okay. I went to Afghanistan first, right after 9/11, and then I went to Iraq in early 03. When we invaded Iraq, we were more conventional force on force than we were in Afghanistan. A lot of Afghanistan was more mountainous, rugged terrain fighting, and they're not necessarily wearing uniforms. And then when we first invaded Iraq, while we were fighting tanks and like the Medina division of armored, division of tanks, they ultimately went to more of guerrilla warfare. There's numerous times I remember being ambushed, and there would be a guy wearing traditional, Muslim dress, but then he would have combat boots on. And so these are the small things we have to pay attention to when we're driving. You'll see somebody's like, he has boots on, or he has his weighted vest or something underneath his clothes. Looking at the eye of the person can tell you everything you need to know about them, if they're going to attack or not. I've seen suicide bombers that would have that death stare in their eyes. You could see something was happening, you just didn't know what was going on. Right. But for that more of a urban terrain, it's a lot of, again, that's where training and communication comes in. You have to be able to communicate where your location is, and then communicate where the enemy is. And if you can do that successfully, you prevent people from getting hurt.
Right. Well, it sounds in that way that you guys could maybe relate a little bit to the soldiers from Vietnam, who were, not always going up against, a traditional enemy.
I always tell them it's the desert Vietnam. I say as a joke, like, yeah, you may have been in the jungle, but we had our own version of it. Yeah. Again, not equating it to Vietnam, more like you don't necessarily know who the enemy is, and they blend in, and especially Afghanistan more so. But then in Iraq, and there's a bit difference. I wouldn't say that there's a heavily religious complement in Vietnam, but I saw that a lot in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, you weren't just fighting people necessarily fighting for their country, but you're fighting for people that were fighting for more than. And so there's a little bit more zeal and fury you'll find when somebody's doing it for their faith.
Yeah.
And but you'll find the Americans, we have our own zeal, and we also have no problem looking forward to a fight. We don't ever run away from a fight.
Yeah. Let me ask you. You were obviously grievously injured, in Iraq. How did that go down? I mean, could you describe that?
Yeah.
That day.
So it was April 8th, 2008. I was on what you call a MIT team, which is a military transition team. Our role was to train the Iraqi military to take over their country one day. So that was our goal. That was our end game. So make sure their military is up and running, and then they're handling all the security, and then we can slowly phase out and go home. At least that's how, the generals pitched everything to us.
Right.
And so being on that team, it was a smaller team. So it was probably about 10, 15 people, including our security that's with us. It's usually senior enlisted and officers that are, someone, a lot of experience. So I was on my 4th deployment. I was at E6 promotable, getting ready to be E7. Mm-hmm. So I was really experienced when it comes to combat. So they of course recruited me to that team. And we were coming back from a mission, Sadr City, which is north of Baghdad. Our mission was to push our Iraqi battalion to blocking positions around Sadr City. So Sadr City was a really bad area. Had Muqta al-Sadr and his Mahdi militia, a lot of Iranian based. They would get their weapons and their bombs from them. And so our goal was to block in these fighters into the city by using, having the Iraqi battalion that we supported do that. So we're more towards the back. We still were there to assist any of the heavy fighting. So we had gun trucks, but we also had capabilities of aircraft and jets or whatever we needed to. We brought the big stuff, but we supported them to lead their own way, if that makes sense. Okay. So we're coming back from that mission early in the morning to refit, which is to go back, get some more food, get some more water, rest if we need to, and then go right back out in the fight. So we've been doing it, I don't know, it was like 24, 30 some hours. It was we've been up for a while during that operation, and they were putting up T-walls, those concrete walls up there to help block them in. So we were coming back and we got hit by a roadside bomb. I was told that it was underneath one of the T-walls on this route. I don't remember the route's name, but it was a double array EFP. An EFP is an explosively formed penetrator. Think of like a cylinder or a coffee can, but a little bit bigger, full of explosives, but it's capped with a concave copper plate. And so what happens is when they fire it, it shoots that copper plate off of there and turns it into like a malleable, penetrating slug of molten copper. And it punched through my up-armored Humvee, the front right door. I was the gunner of the vehicle, so I was higher up than everyone else. If I put my arms to my side, where my elbow is where the next helmet is. So all the people are sitting down there, basically approximately where my waist is. That's how high up I am. And the blast went through the truck, it went through my legs, and it went out the back left door. It didn't even slow down.
Right.
That's how hard it punched. And my boss, Major Mark Rosenberg, died in the blast. I lost my legs in the blast. And our driver, Tony Hardy, specialist, he all of his ribs on his right side were broken. His back was broken. His shoulders were broken. He wasn't breathing. He has a hard time. He was unconscious. And then we had an interpreter named Eminem, his nickname. He, I believe, either passed or he lost his legs too. I don't really know what happened to him. But it all happened in the blink of an eye. I tell people, they ask me what's that like to be in an explosion like that. I said, and the only way I can really explain it is if, say, you have like an old-fashioned calendar or you're looking at a picture on the wall and you're just staring at it intently. You're enjoying it like you would here at Monthaven, and someone walks up behind you with a 2x4 and cracks you in the back of the head. You have no idea it's there. You have no idea there's something happened. You just find yourself coming to on the bottom of the vehicle, and then you try to sit up because you got hurt. You just don't know what. And when I sat up, my legs came up and they were missing.
Right.
And so I have all the weight on my vest, my ammo, all that weighted me down. I couldn't even sit up. And so I knew right then that I was in trouble, and I had to start tourniqueting. Okay. I had to start rendering aid to myself.
Okay. Is this explosive device that you're describing, was this what we hear of as an IED, as an improvised explosive device, something that they kind of came up with? And it sounds very devious.
Yeah.
As opposed to just your typical munitions, which is certainly destructive. But
well, IED, it's any type of improved explosive device, anything that they can use to make it worse, or use it against us. So they'll use artillery, ammo, and they'll hook wires to it to the trigger, and then they can command detonate it with a wire. So this was just another form of an explosion that they used.
Okay, yeah. And I would imagine that, Iraq was full of this kind of booby trapping. So this must be in the back of your mind all the time.
Oh,
I mean, it happened very quickly, you said, and it's just like, well,
it wasn't my first.
Shocking. But you must have been like, this is like something that is like walking through a swamp full of, water moccasins. You're aware that it's there somewhere, right?
Yeah, it wasn't my first IED to ever experience, but it was the first one that ever got me. And we get trained on that. There's certain things that techniques that we do over there to minimize the amount of damage or risk that we can get. They would, a lot of the enemy would drop grenades off overpasses or put bombs underneath overpasses because we were vulnerable to the gunner was. So we would certain tactics I can't really talk about, but we would swerve and weave and stuff. Right. And be unpredictable as best as possible, and that usually helps. And it's kind of fun. I used to tell my driver, drive it like you stole it. And so he would like swerve in the left lane and go over here, and then Okay. So
we're speaking with Army veteran Joe James about his service and his work with Monthaven. We'll be back after this important message.
U.S. Pest Protection reminds us arts education is an essential part of a balanced education. It helps students develop creativity, critical thinking skills, and problem solving. U.S. Pest Protection serving Sumner County for 40 years. For more information, find them at uspest.com.
We're back with Army veteran Joe James. Well, tell me about the recuperation, because that must have been, obviously you're evacuated, and that must have been a very long ordeal.
Yeah, the whole process was timely. A lot of it I was under. Like I had no idea with a lot of the stuff. But when I got injured, I went to the Baghdad hospital. They did initial surgery. I was awake for that. So I was awake from the blast to the hospital. I even told the doctors as they were cutting stuff off me, I felt pain in my back. I didn't know what it was. And so they rolled me over, go, oh crap. And they shoved gauze into my back. So I had part of the blast put a hole in my back.
Yeah.
And so one of their concerns was my stomach, my insides. So they cut open my stomach to make sure everything still where it belongs. And so from that process on, I was pretty much out. They took me to Landstuhl, Germany to Walter Reed and Washington, D.C. And I was there for majority of my 25 surgeries at Walter Reed in a month. It was almost a surgery every day, it felt like, yeah.
Okay. And
then later on I went to Texas.
Right.
And that's where I did the most of my recovery.
Okay. And the recovery must have been fairly significant because, as I understand it, you eventually became something of an athlete, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, because that's pretty amazing.
Well, okay, so I like a challenge. And so, from day one, actually, I told my wife, I called her before as the Army was telling her that I got injured, that I called her after my first surgery, and I said, don't worry, I'm gonna get new legs. And that kind of set the tone for me. This isn't the end of my life. This isn't stopping me from being what I want to be. And so from then on, like during recovery, I had to learn how to walk again. And it was a hard process because you have to heal, then you have to desensitize your legs. You have to be able to even wear carbon fiber on them, put your body weight on there. And so for me, it was just a whole process of enduring, of tenacity, to not give up. And so from then on, it just ultimately led to other opportunities, like start doing 5Ks. So I'd start walking 5Ks. Then I, did a triathlon, but one part of it was in a wheelchair. So I did a few miles in a wheelchair. I just loved doing it. And then I got a hand cycle. Once I got a hand cycle, I did the Marine Corps Marathon. Yeah,
which is that's in DC,
a whole
right?
marathon, which I thought was fun in spite of my Marine brothers.
My gosh.
And then I did the Green Beret Challenge, which was like, I forget how many. It was like 50 some obstacles and like 10 miles of just climbing stuff. I did that with a really great organization. So yeah, it's all about a couple things. One is proving to myself that even with the limitation that some people consider prosthetics, right? You can still live a pretty active, normal lifestyle. And not much can slow you down. But then also to show others, like my children, and to inspire them that you may think that life is hard. You may think that you can't do something. But I'll tell you what, 90% of everything that you go through is mental. You just got to push through that mental part, and then it's all kind of easy after that.
Well, it's interesting that when I was doing a little bit of research, I looked on your Facebook page and saw a picture of you with your wife and your really beautiful daughters.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if that's maybe a big part of your secret success here, is that I look at that picture and I think, this is a lucky guy.
Very.
That's the thing that you look like, what a great family life. That has to be something that really pulls you forward and keeps you going.
The only reason I'm here is because of my wife, and I want to make sure that's very clear. I did suffer from a lot of stuff in the beginning, a lot of self-doubt. I won't lie. Like at some point I looked at myself in the mirror when I was in my wheelchair, and I hated who I saw. Like I had severe depression. Well, I was one of those people as a type A that I was like Superman. I wore the uniform. I thought nothing could hurt me. I was in my mid-20s at the time. And then when I lost my legs, I was like, what do I have? I have nothing. And so I had a pity party a little bit. My wife, I remember one time, I couldn't reach a cereal bowl for my wheelchair. And it was like, 4 inches out of my reach. And I just gave up. I was just huffing. I was mad. I was upset. And she goes, you can get it. Well, I asked her, I said, can you grab it for me? She goes, no, you can get it. Like, grab it. Like, don't quit on it. And there's stuff like that where she gave me that tough love I needed at certain points. Yeah. And from the moment she saw me, I was actually worried in Washington, D.C. when I first saw her, when she first saw me, after my injury. And I was worried that she was going to leave me. Not that I knew she was going to leave me, but I've heard of stories, and I talked to a veteran that his wife left him because he was fully burned, and his wife left him. And I had that fear in the back of my mind. And then I remember my wife walked up to me. She grabbed my hand, put her hand on my chest. I was on a stretcher, a hospital bed. And she goes, we got this. We got this. We can get through this. And I remember that. I was like, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Well, when I saw that picture of you and your family, I was thinking, just all the things that have gone through in that sort of accounting of life, sort of your bank account of life, you still have a really huge surplus.
Yeah, I do. They're a blessing. They're a pain sometimes, but they're
of course. Of course. That's what makes it so great. You've written a book that's an art book, a comic book. Tell me a little bit about that book, the title, and how it works, and what inspired you to do it.
Okay, so the idea is, and that's really how I got inspired to work with Monthaven and their Healing Arts program, which I know we'll talk about in a sec. But I wanted to find an outlet for some of my mental health issues that I was going through. So I was kind of suffering quietly inside. And I was doing, like I said earlier, I wasn't going out, I wasn't talking to people, I wasn't getting help. I didn't know really how to, and I was, and still, I was worried about people seeing me. And so I started doodling, really. That's how it started. I started drawing. And I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. I can kind of take myself out of whatever depression or whatever pain I was going through, especially the physical pain, and I just started getting into it. Then I started like, this is kind of fun. I don't know how to draw. so I started watching videos on YouTube and some other illustrators, and I started just getting to like line working and then ultimately that kind of formed into this idea of a page I made for my kids to color. I was like, hey, I made a rabbit. You guys want to color it? And they're all young little girls. So of course. And so I made another one of something else, and so on and so forth. And then it became almost like a book of pictures. And so, yeah, I decided to make it it's called Adventures in Islandia. And it's a kind of like a choose your own adventure. So it's part story, but also part interactive coloring book. So you can do interactive things through the story. You can color. It's all part about being an adventure. You can start from beginning to the end, or you can jump around. You can go to different pages if you want to experience the island your own way.
Okay, that's terrific. Well, you and your wife, Jarin, are going to be chairing our Boots and BBQ fundraiser. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, it was an honor to be asked. I support anything that Monthaven does for veterans. I'm on their Veteran Advisory Council. This event is really to help fund the Healing Arts program, Between the Lines. I've seen how this program has affected lives. We have in Gallatin, there's a veteran organization there that they have been doing. They've been doing stuff for them, and I've been able to see how the veterans respond to it, and they get out of their rooms and get out of their places and come together and do something artistic and have fun and talk and kind of start talking to each other. And that's where the healing comes, is when you start doing something creative, but not just the creative part, it's doing it together. That's where the real healing comes from.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to be able to be part of this organization and be part of this program on the 19th.
Okay. Well, one further question. For veterans like yourself who have, experienced some kind of trauma, and almost every veteran I know has experienced some kind of trauma if they've been in combat. It goes with the territory, I suppose. But do you have any advice for them?
For the trauma?
For these veterans.
Yeah.
And how they need to move forward with their lives and become successful. You've successfully, created a very happy life for yourself here.
The first thing is get a support group. Find that support group. If you don't have one, you can get one. There's different veteran organizations out there that are specifically designed for this. So get a support group, so when you start going through a hard time outside the public, you can call them or you can be with them. The other thing is start finding something creative to do. And that's where something like the Healing Arts comes in, because that creativity helps push through some of the negativity we have in our lives, the pain that we go through. So find something creative. It could be anything, just something, and get out of the house. Get out of the house. You can paint at home, great. Paint outside in a field. All right, get out of the house, feel the sunlight, and talk to people, because you're gonna find people that understand what you're going through. You're gonna find your veteran friends out there. You're gonna find so much. It's a big world, and it's full of people who care about you. So get out of that house.
Okay. Well, Sergeant First Class Joseph James, U.S. Army retired, thank you so much for visiting us here at MACC Talk.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
You've been listening to MACC Talk from Monthaven Arts and Cultural Center. Our mission is to educate, elevate, and encourage our community through the transformative power of the arts. If you're interested in transforming your creative life, check out our website at monthavenarts.org. Our guest today was Army veteran, author, illustrator, and speaker Joe James. Our podcast music was written by Nashville composer Christina Spinay. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.